Our ancestor, Daniel Thompson, was born on the 25th of December, 1834, in Markham, York, Ontario, Canada, to William and Elizabeth Macaulay Thompson, who had immigrated to Canada from Scotland the year previous. It was in Canada that his parents met and were taught the gospel of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints by Apostle Orson Hyde and missionary Johnny Page. They were baptized into the church in 1836. After joining the church, the Thompson family left Canada to be with the saints in Missouri. When the Missouri persecution began, they followed the church to Illinois. And it was near Nauvoo in Quincy that Daniel's mother, Elizabeth, had a bad fall and passed away in October of 1845 at the young age of 40. In 1851, Daniel's father, William, took his children and traveled across the plains to Utah, and they settled in bountiful Davis County in February of 1852. About this time, Daniel was reaching his maturity and was asked to accompany Bishop Noah Bartholomew of Fillmore, Millard County, Utah, to come and be employed with him. It was while living in Fillmore that Daniel served in the Utah militia for a very short period in 1853 and 54 during the Utah Indian War. When the people of Fillmore, Utah heard the news of a massacre of Captain Gunnison and 11 of his party encamped near the Sevier River by a band of Pavant Indians, Daniel was sent to dispatch the news to Salt Lake City. He was also sent to the site of the massacre to help identify the remains. He married the beautiful Lorinda Elizabeth Bronson, daughter of Lehman and Lucy Brass Bronson, in a double wedding ceremony on the 4th of May, 1854, in Fillmore, Millard County, Utah. Lorinda was born on December 23, 1836, in Brownstown, Wayne County, Michigan. In the year 1866, Daniel accepted a call from the church to serve as a captain of a wagon train, helping LDS converts immigrate across the plains. At that time, he was also a member of the Fillmore City Council and served there for 2 years, and a selectman of Millard County for 10 years. A selectman calls meetings, oversees elections, and many other duties. He accepted a call from the church in 1868 to serve as the presiding authority over the Scipio branch after the citizens of Scipio had moved out of the fort when the threat of Indian attacks had lessened. 1 year later, he was ordained the bishop. This meant he and his family had to leave Fillmore and reside in Scipio. On January 1st, 1869, Daniel married in polygamy Lydia Ann Ivy, daughter of James and Elizabeth Porter Ivy. Lydia was born on September 27, 1850, in Provo, Utah. Daniel served as a member of the Utah Territorial Legislature in 1860 and 1880 and was a delegate to the Utah Constitutional Convention in 1872. During the winter of 1872 through 1873, President Brigham Young invited Thomas Kane, his wife Elizabeth, their 2 youngest sons, and others to winter with him in St. George, Utah. Now, Thomas Kane had a strong personal friendship with President Brigham Young and had spent many years defending the Mormons and mediating disputes about polygamy and territorial issues. President Young and his entourage boarded a train in Salt Lake City and traveled to Lehi, Utah, which was the end of the rail line then. Here they boarded carriages, and from Lehi they traveled on to Provo, Payson, Santaquin, Nephi, Scipio, Fillmore, Kanash, Cove Fort, Beaver, Parowan, Cedar City, and lastly, St. George. Mrs. Kane kept a journal of her trip and wrote very detailed letters to her father, William Wood, in Philadelphia. In 1874, Mr. Wood had Elizabeth's journal and letters published in a book entitled 12 Mormon Homes Visited in Succession on a Journey through Utah to Arizona. He claimed he published the book with the design of getting sympathy for the Mormons who were threatened with hostile legislation by the U.S. Congress. When President Young's group stopped in Scipio, Thomas and Elizabeth Kane and their 2 boys were invited to stay in Daniel and his second wife Lydia's home. Elizabeth wrote, "Scipio is the poorest and newest of the settlements we stopped at, and has been much troubled with the Indians. The Mormons say troubled with the Indians, as we might say troubled with mosquitoes. No one had been killed for 4 years back, though cattle had been driven off that year, we were told." She continued, "The bishop came riding out to meet us, a handsome, kindly-faced man mounted on a horse. We were taken to the house of his second wife, a little one-roomed log cabin with a lean-to behind, in which the cooking was done." To her father, Elizabeth explained the home and its furnishing to the smallest of detail. "The living room was given to us," she said. "Its main glory consisted in a wide chimney place, on whose hearth a fire of great pine logs blazed. That sent a ruddy glow over the whitewashed logs of the walls and the canvas ceiling, and penetrated every corner of the room with delicious light and warmth. There was a substantial bedstead in one corner, and curtains of old-fashioned chintz were tacked to the ceiling around it, as if it had been a 4-poster bed, and a neat patchwork counterpane covered the soft feather bed. A good rag carpet was on the floor, clean white curtains hung at the windows, and clean white covers, edged with knitted lace, covered the various bracket shelves that supported the housewife's Bible, a Book of Mormon, work-basket, looking-glass, and a few simple ornaments. 2 or 3 pretty good colored prints hung on the walls. There was a mahogany bureau, a washstand, a rocking chair, and 6 wooden chairs, with a large chest. The small round table was already spread for our supper with cakes and preserves and pies, and the fair Lydia was busily engaged in bringing in hot rolls, meat, tea, and other good things, while a miniature of herself, still fairer and rosier, about 2 years old, trotted beside her, now endeavoring to rearrange the table by upsetting the plates. This little girl Elizabeth was speaking about was Daniel and Lydia's daughter Lily, who was about 17 months old. Lily died 2 years later in 1874. The Kanes traveled back through Scipio as winter was breaking up, and they again stopped at Bishop and Lydia Thompson's home, thinking to stay in Lydia's cabin, but instead found that she was ill, and they would be staying with Daniel's first wife, Lorinda, our ancestor. Elizabeth wrote, "Sister Lorinda Thompson looked like an elder sister of Mrs. Lydia's, but was no relation. She had a large family of children, but seemed not in the least disconcerted by the addition to her household of our fellow guests." Mrs. Kane recalled, "Mrs. Thompson had a young girl to help her, but more than all, she had faculty, and her meals were served with as much heat in them and coolness in herself as if she had not both her rooms filled with guests and children." Elizabeth Kane did not describe Lorinda Thompson's home as she had Lydia's, but commented more about Lorinda herself. She wrote, "I could not help but express my wonder at Lorinda's deft ways. She came in after her dishes were washed up and sat beside me with her knitting. She laughed when I praised her, saying that it was no wonder she had had a girl to help her these 3 weeks. But she never found the children in her way. No, they were a help. And so they were, the little eldest unrobing the younger ones for bed, or waiting at table without needing directions. They were well trained, as well as healthy, rosy children, and a little creature who could scarcely speak plainly sat on my knee and caroled like a lark." In the following year of 1874, the United Order was put into place in Scipio, with Daniel Thompson as president. Then, after 14 years as serving as bishop in Scipio, he served as first counselor to Ira N. Hinckley, President Hinckley's grandfather, in the Millard Stake presidency. On February 28, 1889, Daniel was indicted for unlawful cohabitation. His wives Lorinda and Lydia, along with sons W.D. and James, were subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury. But no trial was ever held on this charge, and his indictment was ignored in the First District Court, in September of 1890. Daniel later said that Mary Johnson, another of our direct ancestors from Scipio, had hidden him in her upstairs room for weeks when officers were after him. She was the only one who knew where he was, and she kept it an absolute secret. Daniel, with his two wives, Lorinda and Lydia, had 22 children between them. And after the death of Lorinda, his first wife, Daniel and Lydia's marriage was legalized. Daniel died on the 29th of July, 1912, in Scipio, Millard County, Utah. His funeral was attended by a very large number of people, from local citizens to general authorities of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Daniel was a wonderful example of a Christ-like life. Those of his posterity, who likely number in the thousands at this time, should be very grateful to him for leaving his legacy.